My wife and I have two daughters. Like most dads, I don't want to be a burden and I want to be around. Felt it was time for a change. And I'm like, carnivore, I love meat. Started on that, and it's been no looking back ever since. Most people thought I was nuts, but I'm sort of the guy that once I'm convinced, I'm going ahead 100 miles an hour. And those who don't like it, don't like it. And those who do like it, like it. And I don't pay attention to too much of either of them, to be honest. We had a friend over last week. We were just introducing him to the diet, and she has a lot of skin tags too. And I'm like, here, check this out, man. When you lose 100 pounds, it improves your sex life, and it's not just for you.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome. We have Ron. It's good to see you, man. He's going to tell us a little bit about what's going on with him. So, Ron, tell me, where are you located, man?
I'm in upstate New York, kind of at the foothills of the Adirondacks.
Okay.
Near Saratoga Springs, where the track is, if anybody knows that.
Okay, I don't, but I've heard of it. I've heard of it.
It's a horse racing track.
Okay.
It gets very busy in the summer.
Got it. Got a couple of guitars behind you. Well, let's get started here. Tell us a little bit about your background. And I saw you've had a lot of different positive health aspects that have occurred over the years, looks like.
Well, first, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate the chance to tell my story, and thanks for all that you do. I know I'm with a lot of people who really appreciate everything.
Well, I mean, it's like I said, you guys are what makes this important, and like I said, I'm just trying to share some information. So good for you for being open-minded to try it. So
thanks.
So how old are you?
I'm 52. I'll be 53 next week.
Okay. So you're about my age. So we're similar time. Grew up in the 70s. So awesome.
Yes. Yep. So I started out, just normal lifelong eating standard American diet. By the time I graduated high school, I'm 5'6". I weighed about 205 and had a 36-inch waist. Did construction, so I stayed pretty fit, through most of that time. But then in my 40s, I changed careers, got into IT, and the IT life is not very physical and really stressful, and everything kind of went to crap during my 40s. Finally led up to a Bell's palsy episode in February of this year. And it had coincided with my brother had what they had called a minor stroke last year, where he forgot how to read for about 2 hours. So after that, waking up with Bell's palsy and having half my face not responding, your first thing you're thinking is stroke.
Yeah, so, certainly that can be, those facial paralysis definitely can be an indication of a stroke for sure. Yeah,
it scared the shit out of me. So I did some self-testing and made sure I still knew who I was and all that. And I ended up driving myself to the hospital, to be honest. But it was a real scare. And I got, my wife and I have two daughters, 18 and 21. And, like most dads, I don't want to be a burden and I want to be around, so I felt it was time for a change. And I saw actually Jordan Peterson on Joe Rogan first. And then right after that, I'm like, carnivore, I love meat. But I also love my bread and buns. So I did that and started on that, and it's been no looking back ever since.
So how long? So George, because I was on Joe's show in 2017, and then Michaela went on, I think in 2018. I think her dad as well. So that was 4 years. Was that when you saw it? Is that when you started 4 years ago?
I think Jordan Peterson had been on like a year before when I finally saw it. I had just come out of a pretty high paying IT gig in a way that didn't end well, and was kind of pissed at the world. And Jordan Peterson really helped me sort of give a shit, and then that got me researching and trying to figure things out from there. And then Carnivore was kind of the, after Rogan, I said, all right, I got to get a handle on this and give it a try. So,
and I'm just kind of looking at a little overview of some of the stuff you had. So obviously you had the Bell's palsy, you'd mentioned you're, 5'6", 215 at, when you're very young.
That was after high school. I was up to about 280 when I had Bell's palsy.
5'6". So that's pretty big size there. And so you had a number of things that I think I was just reading about, a lot of weight loss, diverticulosis, some mental health stuff, blood pressure issues, skin tags, which usually could go with insulin resistance. So talk about, well, what all was going on? Is that pretty comprehensive? What are the things you're dealing with?
Yeah. I mean, really, the diverticulosis, I had initially everything started. I had gallstones in 2014. And I ended up actually, believe it or not, getting them out with a flush that I found online. The doctors still were amazed that works. But I had then had diverticulosis with a ruptured colon. It was like a few years after. And when I went in, the first thing, of course, they suspected was the gallstone. So they did an X-ray, and they're like, "Hey, there's no gallstones." I said, "Yeah, I know. I was able to flush those." But then there was a rupture of the colon, and they actually admitted me and were going to do surgery. I'm not sure exactly why, but I guess it healed up well enough in the 24 hours I was in the hospital. They didn't have to do the surgery. But it was when they did the colonoscopy, they said that the diverticulosis, whatever the pockets are called, were basically peppered throughout my colon, which is not normal because they're down in this area, I guess, normally. Yeah. So it was, I was heading for some troubles for sure, I think.
Yeah. For the people who don't know, yeah, like diverticulosis, these little pouches that occur in the colon, and then they later can, get like particles can get trapped in there, usually like seeds and little pieces of undigested, usually plant material. Often that's associated with diverticulitis, and you get this, and you may have had an episode of that where it flares up and is very painful and sometimes requires antibiotics and surgical resection in some cases. So, okay, so you got the diverticulosis issue, you have the gallbladder. What was the flush you used? I'm sure somebody will want to ask. What did you use?
Honestly,
to flush it
out? I can't even, it's hard to find it now. It was something called Dr. Axe's flush, and it involved for 3 days beforehand, I was eating like apples and things like that. And then at the last night, I had to sleep a certain way, and I drank a cup of olive oil.
Interesting.
And got up in the middle of the night, and that was the end of the gallstones.
Interesting. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if that.
Hey, if I didn't have the X-rays to show people, I wouldn't believe it myself. I know that I was having pain pretty regularly, and it went away. So, I guess I'll take what the doctors say and roll my eyes with everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, there's some medications some people use to dissolve them, things like ursodiol, and some of those things can have been shown to do that. So interesting. All right, so you see Jordan Peterson. You're kind of in a crossroads, a lot of change, job change. And so how did so you've got a lot of weight. How about joints? You have back pain, knee pain, shoulder pain?
Super. I've been like I said, I was in construction since, my dad was in the business. So I've been in it for most of my life learning. And by the time I would say I hit 30, I had my first back injury, where you were out for a few days kind of thing. And those, sort of never heal up when you're constantly putting pressure on them. I have a torn rotator cuff that they want me to have surgery on in this shoulder. That is really the only joint pain that hasn't gone away. Okay. Everything else, my knees, of course, when you're that fat, your knees hurt. Simple as that, from about 2 minutes after you get up,
Yeah, it's interesting, I mean, a lot of the, and that's what I've seen. A lot of people see significant improvements in joint pain and muscle tendon pain and things like that. I think a lot of it's just an inflammatory, and fat itself produces all these inflammatory cytokines. It's not so much, the weight probably doesn't help, but it's probably just as much, if not more so, the inflammation that's going on. So tell us about when you decide to make the decision to go carnivore. Did everybody think you were nuts? Did you discuss it with anybody?
Yeah, most people thought I was nuts, but I'm sort of the guy that once I'm convinced, I'm going ahead 100 miles an hour, and those who don't like it, and those who do like it, and I don't pay attention to too much of either of them, to be honest. About 3 months in, and my wife, Rebecca, she had tried to allow me, she'd introduced the Whole30 to me a couple of times and all that. And I've never been a big vegetable guy. I've eaten vegetables because they were healthy, but if I have my choice, I'm not going to pick up the plants. So it made it pretty easy for me. And she started out after I'd probably lost about 40 pounds. So probably I would say April, May timeline. And since then, she's also lost about 45 pounds. So she's doing real well as well.
Yeah, I'm with you on the vegetables. I never liked them. Don't miss them at all. I got to tell you.
Yeah.
I
can't unless you put some meat in them.
Exactly. You could flavor them with a little meat fat or something like that.
That's
or animal
right.
fat, and you might make them palatable. But so you've lost 100 pounds, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Is that correct? That's huge.
Yep.
I mean, that's tremendous. And how long have you kept?
Thanks.
How long have you kept it off?
Well, I hit 100 about 5 weeks ago, and I'm at like 97 now.
Okay. So
I'm sort of at the weight where I feel comfortable and healthy. You know, I'm about 180, 185 right now.
Good for you.
And I'm sort of at the mark where I'm kind of playing with things a little bit. You know, as you can tell from my Bills jersey, I got to get the Bills Mafia in there. I'm a NFL fan, so I reintroduced beers for the first time when the NFL came back, and I've been sticking to Mick Ultra instead of my wicked hard ciders that I was drinking before. And I've been okay with those, but I found that there's a line where all of a sudden everything I don't want to eat looks really good. Mm-hmm. So I have to limit myself to just a couple of beers.
Yeah, that's a problem with alcohol. It makes you make otherwise, silly decisions in some cases with food in that case. So, so I mean, like the joint pain went away. You lost 100 pounds. I assume your mental health improved.
I don't know how much credit to give to the diet and how much to Jordan Peterson, because his book had a big influence on me as well. And just as far as, stopping making excuses for things being the way they were and kind of taking charge of it. And that was, once I started eating right, I think things just kind of compounded from there,
The skin tags go away?
Oh my God. I told my wife, I said, I had so many skin tags. It was like I was wearing a meat necklace. And now I've got like 3 or 4. We had a friend over last week. We were just introducing him to the diet, and she has a lot of skin tags too. And I'm like, here, check this out, man. So I can say that for sure. Yeah.
And for those that aren't aware, skin tags are very highly associated with insulin resistance. I mean, that's a really common thing to see. And some people would suggest it's the hyperinsulinemia allowing for additional growth of these sort of unusual things. They're called acrocordons. And I think we see all these other growths that also sometimes show up, lipomas and, maybe even things like uterine fibroids and prostatic hypertrophy, all these things that seem to shrink when you improve the insulin status in a lot of cases. So it's really,
and a lot of other things, as far as even, when you lose 100 pounds, it improves your sex life, and it's not just for you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you mentioned your wife lost 40, 50 pounds as well, 45 pounds. I mean, that's got to help her overall health as well. And,
Absolutely. Yep.
What are you guys eating now? So you mentioned, outside of a couple beers,
it's a lot. It's a lot of beef. I just love steak. I've always loved steak. We don't necessarily focus on any one brand. Kind of pay attention to sale flyers, and if we get sirloins or something, we supplement with eggs. We eat pork. I was at a farmer's market this weekend. I picked up my first beefalo, so we're going to try that. We try to sort of vary it. We both like seafood. I like sardines. My wife doesn't, so I'll throw a couple in some eggs. I'll hide them for her, but just kind of let our bodies sort of tell us what we feel like for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of eat what tastes good to you. Basically, sounds like.
Oh yeah, and we went out to eat for my mother-in-law's birthday a couple weeks ago, and it was a prime rib with side potatoes and this and that. I said, I'd like the prime rib and just the prime rib. Mm-hmm. And then I tried to talk him into a couple burger patties instead of the sides, but I couldn't get him to talk it into it. I couldn't talk him into it.
I was in a restaurant recently on vacation down in Mexico, and I had a steak, and they asked me for a side, and I said, I'll have a pork chop for a side. Which was, okay. They just got
after the tilted head. Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, it's great. So, as far as you said the doctors are. So, I assume you're still seeing some physicians. I mean, one you said one wants to.
Yeah. My PA is actually a friend. He's been over in my recording studio a couple of times to hang out. So I have a little bit better relationship to him. When I was in there, or with him, when I was in there, they liked all my numbers. They didn't like my LDL cholesterol. They said that was too high. It was at 166. But my HDL to triglycerides was about 2.1. So I'm not really too concerned with 166 on my LDL.
So your HDL was 2 to 1. So what was your HDL and triglycerides?
I'm trying to think. It was like 62 and 130.
130 was the HDL or the triglycerides?
I think the higher number was the triglycerides.
Okay. So still not over 150, but
Right. And has come down. Those numbers, my HDL went up, my LDL went up, but my triglycerides came down.
Yeah, usually the HDL and the LDL rise together in many cases, particularly in these low carb diets. And so with the 160 LDL, many physicians would be concerned about that. They would recommend, you change your diet, you go on a statin because it's a independent risk factor for cardiovascular disease. Has that discussion been had with you, and what's been the result of that?
He tried, but no, he knew right from the get-go. I said, I know you're worried about that 166. I said, I'm not interested in a statin as an option. Okay. He said, You're a big boy. I said, all right. And he, like I said, he's a friend. So I was able to, even at 185, and I know you've run into this, even though I don't look obese. I have a 32-inch waist now, I'm still considered obese because I'm kind of bigger in the upper body. So I wrote him and told him I wanted to be considered not obese. And he told me I was still considered obese, but that's okay. Because even with his washboard abs, he was considered obese by the scale. So the next morning I wrote him, I said, here, fatty, here's an article on keto blood test results.
Yeah, it's the BMI can be, for most people, I think it's a reasonable assessment. But I mean, there's I'm either overweight or obese, depending on if I fluctuate 5 or 10 pounds. And clearly, most people assume I'm not over obese. My body fat's not high, I should say. It's more accurate, I suppose. But do you, as far as did you have any negative type stuff come up? Any problems doing the diet? Anything that kind of bothered you?
Yeah, the first 3 weeks, because I went and switched, just one day to the next, like a light switch. I really had some gastro issues. I tell people I got dumber than a stump for about 2 weeks. And I think it really took 3 weeks before I started to feel good. But I was losing, 10, 12 pounds a week. So it makes it pretty easy to, just push through. I was either going to make it or croak at that point.
Well, and that's something to be mindful of. Some people do have some GI and transition issues. And usually people that, and this is something I learned from people who've been doing this for 10 years plus. They said, most people take between 3 and 8 weeks to sort of transition over. And I think that observation, I think, holds up pretty well. And I think some athletes might even take a little longer for athletic performance. So that's something that I've seen over the years. Day 70 is where I wrote in my journal that I really felt good, like really good. Yeah, it's interesting. The data, we collected data on about 12,000 of you guys doing this diet. And by about 3 months, most people saw a pretty significant upward trajectory. That was kind of an inflection point for many people. If you can stick it out for 3 months, and conversely, if you do it for 3 months and you don't get any better, then I'd say, hey, try something else perhaps. But that's good to hear from you, because that's the number we told our friends too. If they're going to try this, they can't, they can't give up after 2 weeks of toughness and think that's going to be it. Yeah, I think 90 days is a good trial, and then you go from there if it doesn't get it for you. Do you, are you focusing on higher fat, higher protein? Does it matter? Do you think about that? We just try to keep the balance, like we're just aware in the sense that, like I said, if we have like a lower cut beef or a roast, we'll have some eggs with it. Where if we have the ribeye that, we might not have any eggs that night. Yeah. Just more an overall sense of being aware of it. And also my wife's, sorry, Rebecca, but I told her I might talk about this. My wife's bowel movements are a good indicator of whether we're getting enough fat in our diet or not. Oh, I guess since you brought it up, how so? Is it if they're regular, it's fine? It seems to be, and I've heard the reverse. So I've heard it both ways, but it seems to be when we don't quite get enough fat, she gets a little more constipated. Yeah. That's certainly, I've seen that many times. That's, I think there is a balance. I think, I mean, there's a sweet spot everybody seems to hit, and maybe it varies from over month depending on what else is going on. But you have to get enough fat.
And that's another area for me, with not to get hung up on the poopy talk, but I went 10 years without having a bowel movement that sunk basically, and now, it's not, clanking to the bottom of the toilet, but everything is normal, and it just feels completely different, and it's not 3 times a day.
Yeah, I wonder, like I said, I don't know if the diverticulosis can be reversed, but I mean, you haven't had any symptoms of bad gastrointestinal pain or anything like that.
When I did go in the hospital, by the way, when you said it, it clicked with me. They did call it diverticulitis at that point.
Yeah, that's what
I wasn't aware really what the difference was.
Yeah, it's just an inflammation of those pouches, basically, is what that is. And so that makes sense to me. You have not had a recurrence of that since Carnivore, though.
No.
Yeah. And
no, nothing gastro, other than those first few weeks where, I was understanding about, I'd educated myself. And I think that's super important is you better be convinced mentally, because you are going to come up against all the bullshit with the people in the world who think they're doing you good by telling you what an idiot you are.
Well, I mean, it's at the end of the day, you objectively can look at your own results. And I mean, when you look at, just the pathophysiology of how diverticulitis occurs, I mean, there's this sort of this generalized thought, well, we got to cut back on red meat and eat more fiber, which, I mean, if we're thinking about what can possibly get into those diverticulates, it's going to be the fiber and the seeds and the nuts and the fragments of vegetables that don't get digested, whereas meat is, I mean, if you've got a functioning human gut, it's digested in the small intestine before it even gets into the colon. So it doesn't make sense just from a basic first principles standpoint. So, and that's what I've seen.
From a weight loss standpoint, you lose 100 pounds. Generally, it gives you credibility with most folks,
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and again, this is a nice sort of, and this is a recurrent theme we see is, you've seen your LDL go up or as high. I don't know what it was before, but and many people say, well, that's a problem for heart disease. But then you're like, well, what about the 100 pounds I lost? What about the decrease in inflammation? What about the improvement probably in blood pressure and all these other things that have improved?
Yeah, my wife and I went to a local amusement park this weekend, and we did, we have our little Fitbits now, and we both did, 18,000 steps and had no problems with that. I used to have to stop 3 times just, walking up to the back of the park when I, was at my heaviest. So, there's, like you've said several times, I've heard you say that there's a quality of life issue. And if it, I don't care if it shortens my life 2-3 years or whatever. I personally think it's going to extend it, but it for the quality of life and to not be, who the hell wants to be around while their kids are visiting them in nursing homes? My wife works in a nursing home. I play guitar and sing in there. Like you were saying in a video I watched recently of yours, it's not a pleasant place. And it's, not a happy place for family members to come and visit. I don't want to be that to my family.
Yeah, I as a physician, I went to a number of nursing homes over this part of training and some of the other stuff. We would go in there, and it was, you just felt sad going in there because everybody's, literally people just sitting around waiting to die, and it's just like they're fed horrible food, and it's just, and it's interesting because I mentioned there's a fella, and I'll try to get him on here for an interview, but he runs basically a nursing home assisted living facility, and he's put people on a carnivore diet, and he's saying the people that weren't able to walk before are now walking. People that had no energy are now energetic. Their blood glucoses are normalizing. So, I mean, this is, and this is a group of people.
I saw a snip from that video. That was awesome. And I was in there, it made me think I was in a nursing home last week getting ready to play, and you have to take a COVID test in New York right now. So I was sitting in the waiting room waiting for the results there before I could go in and play. And these folks walk in, 2 obese folks, and they got this little bag full of these little Debbie treats. And I just sat there feeling bad, and going, man, we're so trained poorly. And it just is so integrated into our society. It's really going to take a hell of a concerted effort to change things on any big scale. So I'm glad there's folks like you around, Doc.
Well, and you're part of this too. I mean, everybody watching this, we're all part of that. It's on all of us. I mean, we really have to do. And I think this is the message I've saying. It's going to be a grassroots thing, and we all have to be engaged. And, you and package your wife and, probably some other people, maybe the PA that treats you is watching you and going, hey, wait a minute. Maybe I have another patient that would benefit from this for a period of time. And maybe I'll maybe I'll just kind of just watch the LDL for a while and maybe do some other tests, but let's see if we can do this happen. And I know there's a number of studies that are going to happen. We're doing some, and there's going to be some others coming down. So we're going to get more and more, information about this. So it's really, really neat to see. As far as someone who has lost 100 pounds, what are you eating? I mean, quantity wise. Now, what does a day look like for how many calories you consume, or how much food are you consuming?
I'm pretty much one meal a day. And my meal ends up being in the evening just because that's when it works best with my wife's schedule. She can, so I've never been a big breakfast guy. In the morning, I get up, we do have coffee, and I put heavy cream in that, not half and half, nothing with any kind of glucose, just the milk fat. So I'll have a couple cups of coffee, and then pretty much that's it for the whole day. And at night, I find I'm eating between 2,000 and 3,000 calories in that meal. And then I fall asleep like a bear, which I know they also say isn't supposed to be the healthiest, but I don't know. It's seemed to have worked for me. I'm not having sleep issues or anything.
Well, I mean, you can't argue with success. I mean, things that work, if they work for you, they work for you. What about, there was a period of time when you were, morbidly obese, 100 pounds overweight, you would clearly fall in the morbid, and you were eating things, you said standard junk food. And quite honestly, I think the more you get in that situation, the harder it is. You just you just go down this awful path where, it just gets worse and worse. And I've seen that in some of the vegans and those guys that you've had on your video, that sort of mental health cycle where you just get on the crap treadmill and you can't fall off. Yeah, absolutely. That occurs. And so do you find that you're able to, because this is a lot of people have issues with not being able to quit that stuff. They say, I just can't stop eating these treats. I just can't give up this and that. And I've seen uniquely with the carnivore diet, many people find they for whatever reason, they don't have as many cravings. Has that been your experience as well?
It has, like I said, when it was, you're going to make me confess now. When I was talking about having more than like 2 or 3 beers, the example I was thinking of was my daughter she hasn't come along on the carnivore journey. She has a little sweet treat, and I kind of raided her little Debbie stash after 4 beers one day. So that has been the only real craving I had. Other than that, I feel so good, and I'm so convinced it's best for me in the long term. That at 52, I'm able to make a little better decisions than I have in the past necessarily.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the alcohol kind of clouds your judgment. I mean, was there a negative impact from eating a little Debbie? I don't think I've had it. I can't remember the last time I had a little Debbie. It's been
I noticed that I just kind of felt crappy the next day, and maybe it was just guilt, but just my stomach didn't feel, because my stomach feels so good all the time now, and it just kind of felt a little heavy. And I can't imagine, that little tiny little Debbie snack cake had that much, heft in there. But I know internally I just didn't feel quite as good as I had.
Well, it's something that, I mean, I remember when I went carnivore, this is 6 years ago now, and I was just profoundly shocked at how good my digestion felt for the first time in my life, because I'd been so used to feeling a certain way after eating and just assuming, well, it's just normal. You're just eating, it's digestion, and we kind of normalize all this pathology. I mean, I'm now convinced that your gut should not hurt at all after you eat. There's no reason for you to have discomfort after you eat. Maybe you ate too much, or maybe your guts are sick or something like that. But in general, when we're eating food, we shouldn't have discomfort, bloating, pain, gas, reflux. All those things are abnormal. And yet there are many people, particularly when it comes to bloating, we see a lot of these females, in their skinny yoga pants and showing their big belly bloat, not saying it's normal to bloat. I'm like, no, it's not. You're eating raw food.
You were asking about I have noticed I'm more sensitive to I had some super highly processed. It was my brother-in-law talked me into this hamburger bun with all these seeds all over it for my daughter's high school graduation this year. And after that party, we left those buns on the counter because we aren't eating them. And 10 weeks later, they were still there and still not moldy. But I know that the night I ate that burger, I actually got sick.
Yeah, there's well, I mean, the shelf-stable foods, I mean, there's got a lot of things in there, preservatives that keep them from going bad, and they keep them on the shelves for 6 months a year because that's how they maintain their profitability in many cases. So it is, we just wonder what it does to us long-term, chronically over a period of year after year. I mean, a lot of the food testing is basically, did it give anybody cancer? Did it kill anybody? No. Okay, make it generally recognized as safe, and then we just eat it.
Yep.
And then we find out years later, wait a minute, I'm obese and I've got autoimmune issues and gut issues, and then you take all those things out, and lo and behold, wow, all that stuff gets better.
Yeah. Well, the one health thing too, I forgot to mention, so something just clicked the switch, is when I went in for the eye exam at the end of the Bell's palsy, they had the very beginnings of macular degeneration, like they saw those first deposits. And in the beginning of my carnivore journey, I've read a lot about seed oils possibly being something to do with that. I've cut out all seed oils altogether.
Yeah, it's interesting about the debate about seed oils. There's a lot of people that are adamant that is the root cause of all the evil in society, and certainly you can make the argument that seed oils didn't exist prior to the late 1800s, which they didn't.
Yeah.
So they're not part of our natural diet. And the other thing you see is those seed oils generally appear in just junk food. I mean, so if you cut out seed oils, you're by definition going to cut out a lot of junk food, most of the junk food. And I don't know if it's a confounder that it's just because it so frequently appears in junk food that's the deal. And not many people are just eating pure seed oils. I mean, there's very few people that are in there eating tablespoons of canola oil. I mean, this doesn't happen. Yeah. It's usually in something else. So there may be that confounder as well. Or
we're deep frying. I used to do quite a bit of deep frying, and that was obviously in corn oil or something.
Now you could deep fry. I guess you might make the argument you can deep fry in things like tallow. I mean, that used to be the old way of doing it. I don't know if you ever do that anymore.
We got an air fryer. And that has been, I still like my chicken wings with my football games. So I air fry some wings up every week. Yeah. I prefer my steak cooked in my heavy cast iron pan to air fried.
Yeah.
So we use that for the steaks most of the time.
Yeah, me too. I got an air fryer, and I don't cook steaks in there. I'm just like, if I've got a better option, I mean, it'll do in a pinch. But
I was going to say, you got that fancy schmancy grill.
Yeah, I do. I got the little fancy schmancy grill.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it works pretty well, and it gets a real nice sear on there. And to me, I like it that way. So, I mean,
how do you like the sous vide?
I like it a lot. I use it quite a bit. In fact, I've got 2 steaks in the sous vide right now. I'm usually sous vide while I'm doing my interviews, and then I go down and throw it in the sear up.
We're debating that. We just got a meat slicer so that we could make roast beef nice and thin. So we were thinking about
get a food dehydrator as well. I'll tell you, that's a beautiful snack. That would be a fun snack to have for a football game. You take some real thinly sliced steaks. Costco is selling these New York strips right now. They slice them about 1/8 of an inch thin. I just throw them in the food dehydrator, a little salt overnight for about 12 hours at 145 degrees. And that's like the best damn thing in the world. I mean, I go by and I'll walk by the kitchen counter, I'll grab one. There's usually I usually have a couple bags sitting around all the time. The whole family just goes by. My kids, I snack on them, my girlfriend. Everybody comes by and they're always munching on those things. So that's a great little, that would be a great snack to bring to a football party or something like that.
That's it. My mouth's watering now. Sold.
It's good. Yeah, get some with a little bit of fat on there. I think you want to get that fat and a little bit of fat because you're gonna really enjoy the flavor, as opposed to regular beef jerky is often too dry, and it's they usually have to pump it through full of.
Wouldn't it be nice to have a store-bought jerky with no sugar in it?
Yeah, I mean, there are a few brands out there, but they, generally, I got to tell you, I much prefer the homemade to the store-bought, just because, again, sometimes they have to do these things to, keep the shelf life, and they pump them full of fluid to increase the cost, per pound, because you're paying for water, and so.
I was standing in the cash register at the local grocery store last week, and I stopped counting at 125 items that were like within my grab, and only 2 of them had no sugar. One was water and the other was unsweetened iced tea.
Do you, you said your daughter is not on board, if she doesn't have any health issues, maybe there's no reason to, but I mean, it's one of those things where it seems to me, most of us that do this diet are, and not all, there's exceptions, but most of us tend to be a little bit older. Most of us have had some sort of health issue we've had to overcome. And I mean, have you seen, well, I guess, has your outlook on a lot of things changed since changing the diet? Has it changed you in any other ways?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, I hearken back to, I give Jordan Peterson a lot of credit for helping me kind of over that hump there. But I truly believe that the diet keeps me in a healthy place, because when I do have, even just those few beers, like it seems like my mental attitude may not be as good the next couple of days. I'm kind of more likely to just have a generally pissy attitude about something,
How are the Buffalo Bills doing this year? I haven't really paid attention.
They are fantastic. Number one in the league, in my opinion, but I'm a homer.
You're a true fan for them. Good for you. I really have not paid much attention to the NFL since I was a kid. I remember I grew up in Chicago, and I suffered through the Chicago Bears I remember Walter Payton. He was one of my favorite athletes.
The monsters of the Midway, man.
Yeah, I mean, with the Dick Butkus time, but I mean, they were horrible for so many years, and Peyton was still leading the league, behind this awful team. And then the year I moved from Chicago to Texas, the next year they win the Super Bowl, which kind of, I was like, they beat the Patriots.
Well, maybe it was your fault. My sister thinks she's the jinx when the Bills lose.
It could be. Yeah, it could be that thing. Let's talk about it, because a lot of people say this diet's unaffordable. It's too expensive. We can't do it. Has that been your experience? What do you?
No, I think that's completely false. I think that for the first few weeks, I was still eating 3 meals a day, even though it was meat. And at that point, it was higher. But once I was down to 1 meal a day, you can eat a hell of a nice steak, if it's your only calories for the day. Our grocery bill is down probably 25% over when we weren't eating carnivore.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. And you think about all the waste that you don't have, because it was interesting. I just saw there's less household waste being made. I know we had some friends come on and stay with us.
Less dishes. My wife loves it. She says the dishes are so much easier to do now because there's not 14 dishes unless I try to make some of that keto macaroni and cheese out of chicken hamburgers. That's weird.
Yeah. You can make it so simple. It simplifies your life. You can spend a lot of less time thinking about food and eating food and preparing food. And then
that's a great point. Yeah. Less time thinking about food is I'll be out working on music in the studio after work, or just working throughout the day. And I've seen you do it, where you say, well, I haven't eaten in 22 hours, I'll go 10, 12 hours without thinking about it. And
yeah, I'm
look up and go, wow.
I am, I've been doing the 1 meal a day thing lately. And so it's 23 hours for me right now. So about another just under 23 hours. And I'm fine. I'm starting to think about it. I'm going to really enjoy this. They say that, I think there's a saying in French, it's translated, hunger is the best sauce. And so if you eat something, you're a little bit hungry, and it's like, wow, it tastes so darn good. And
you got those big glycogen tanks on the side of you too.
Yeah, I got those little deformities, those little growths that occur. My dogs eat at the same time as me. We all eat the same time. I eat my 1 meal a day. My dogs eat the 1 meal a day, and they've kind of.
I've switched my cat to carnivore.
Yeah, well, good for your cat. Your cat's a lot happier.
He's happier. I don't know.
Probably doesn't want to go outside as much. It's kind of funny. This is something it's kind of a serious topic, but domestic house cats, particularly the ones that are allowed outside, they go through.
Ours go outside pretty regularly.
Yeah, they probably
find little friends
they probably pick off a lot of birds and mice and animals. I mean, they've done studies on the cats, and they estimate between something like 6 and 23 billion with a B little animals are eaten by cats. House cats every year. And
people want to exterminate all those.
Yeah. Basically, it's one of those things. The cats, they do a pretty good job of keeping the pests away for sure. But that's
come for my cat, you're going to have to take me first.
Well, I'm sure the cat's going to be pretty happy getting a carnivore diet. I think if pets had a vote on what their owners ate, if they took a vote, I'd say like 99.9% of them say, I want my owner to be a carnivore. Because it usually improves.
Well, it's got to tell you something about your diet when you're reading your cat food's ingredients list and going, what the hell is this? 4 kinds of sugar.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like some of the cat food and dog food is very similar to what they're feeding us, and you're like, wait a minute, am I a pet?
Yeah, it was crap. I'm like, we can't feed this to them anymore.
Yeah, exactly. So, Do you, as far as work wise and stuff like that, I mean, do you feel like you are able to perform better? I mean, you said, I know you use musical stuff.
Mental focus is very good. I told my wife when I'm playing out now, and I've played acoustic guitar and sung for years and years, but it's almost like I'm able to sort of go to another level. I use a looper and I'm able to like stack parts and stuff. And I just mentally feel like there's more in the tank than there used to be. And I'm less distracted.
Yeah. And I don't have much knowledge about music, but I appreciate that. My son is learning piano, and he's got, some of you guys know Steak and Butter Gal, but her boyfriend Max is training my boy how to play. And he's a tremendous musician. He was a guy that trained at Juilliard, and she did too. And I think she had an appointment at the Royal Academy in London, and she ended up not going for whatever reason. But yeah, the musical stuff is really, really cool. I wish I had the ability. I just don't, or I guess the time to do it at this point. It's kind of
well, and we all got our priorities, Shawn. You're a world-class athlete. Anything you're going to be great at takes a lot of your time.
Yeah, it does. It does. It sucks up a lot of time for sure. And it's like, you can only be good at so many things in life, and most of the time there's very few things you can do.
That jujitsu and guitar playing does not mix either.
Yeah, it's finger wise. Your fingers are suffering jujitsu. I've got sore fingers quite a bit. Particularly when if I haven't been in a while, my fingers don't hurt, and then I go back and my fingers hurt again. So it's kind of a crazy thing. Now, are you worried about? I just saw you take a drink of water. How does hydrate? Do you do salt? Do you do electrolytes? What do you do with your hydration?
You know what we started doing maybe a month and a half ago is the LMNT. Mm-hmm. She uses it. I use it pretty much on days when I'm doing construction work. Okay. I drink the lemon lime. I think tell people it tastes like salty lemon lime Gatorade. But I have felt like that's made a difference, just in terms of like no hunger pains, that kind of thing. She was having some cramps in the middle of the night in her legs, and the LMNT seemed to help with that, along with trying to get a little more iron, a little more liver in her diet.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's one of those things where, I think Rob Wolf did a good job when he and Luis Villaseñor and Tyler Cartlett, when they came together, and I think they really thought about how to formulate that stuff. I think it's a good product. I will take it too, and particularly when I'm sweating a lot, because if I'm working out, or particularly jujitsu, when I go to jujitsu, I'm sweating like crazy, just because having some big sweaty guy laying on top of you makes you sweat too. And it's kind of
when you were telling me about you're telling us about the 270-pound college wrestler this morning, I was laughing my ass off picturing that.
Yeah. I end up going. I usually end up with the big people because I'm a big guy, and usually I end up going against. I kind of generally try to pick the tougher guys in the room, just the way I like to do that. But as a result, it's a lot of I'm fighting for my life a lot, and that makes you sweat, believe it or not. If you find that out. Do you find that anybody has been negative about what you've been doing? Have you got any much of that?
Well, there was a lot of fear from well-intentioned people. Most of these guys weren't, trying to be jerks. They were just genuinely concerned. But what I found was that when you're really fat and you lose 30 pounds, everybody's really happy for you. But when you lose 100 pounds, they think you have cancer. Mm. So it's that has been kind of an eye opener to have somebody come up that hasn't seen me in 2 years, and I look in every way better. Yeah. And they're like, "Are you okay? Is everything all right?"
Yeah, that is, and the same thing, when you're in the office just munching on fast food and junk food all day, no one bats an eye, no one says anything, but you roll out there and you pull out a plate of hamburger or a steak, and everybody's looking at you like, "What the hell's wrong with you?" Yeah, it's kind of crazy where we've seen that meme produced many, many times, but it's real. I mean, people are like, "What? Why aren't you eating all the junk food that I'm eating?"
Yeah. You eat a burger without a bun?
Yeah. Exactly. It's crazy. I could never do that. I hear a lot of people, I could never do that. Well, you get sick enough over a period of time, you probably could.
Yeah, I was going to say, you told me, you've said that there's people whose legs you've cut off rather than have them stop eating bread. That's crazy.
Yeah, I remember I had a guy thank me for cutting off his leg because he was so miserable. He was infected and his pain, and he felt better when his leg. And it was just a burden, and all that and you cut it off, and they actually feel better because they're so miserable. You think about it, you feel better after you cut your leg off, which is how sad the situation is. But then they go right back to what put them there in the first place, which is just, an awful lifestyle. Have you, you lost 100 pounds. Were you doing a lot of exercise to lose 100 pounds, or was it mostly just diet?
It was, work, my work, I do carpentry and masonry. So that's pretty physical, by itself. I got into hitting a punching bag a little bit, and I really do enjoy that. But I was worried about the repetitive on my hands, causing issues with my guitar playing. One of the things that actually improved from that. So my answer quickly would be, for about 2 weeks, I did a little bit, but for the most part, no, I just count on my work. Yeah. But when I started this, when I would play guitar for about 15 minutes, I would start to have tingling in my fingers and some numbness. I haven't had that in 4 months. So that has gone completely away. And I don't know what that is. I'm sure it's probably something with insulin resistance as well.
Yeah, it's probably just swelling. And we get a lot of times when you're that heavy, everything you got chronic inflammation, and you got probably excess body fluid on you, and it's just pressure. The pressure on the nerves, and when that swelling goes out, a lot of those things get better. It's pretty interesting to see. I've seen a lot of peripheral neuropathies get better, carpal tunnel syndrome, things like that, by fixing the diet, believe it or not. I would have never known that, in years past until I've experienced it and seen it from so many other people.
And that that green, nasty toe fungus, like I couldn't wear open-toed shoes for 15 years. That's almost back to normal at this point.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've heard people, I fortunately have not had that issue, but I've heard a lot of people talk about things like toenail fungus, and some of these things get better on carnivore, and it's, it may just be our body is now, perhaps they feed on, different, I don't know.
Yeah, it just blows me away,
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's amazing the weird things that seem to occur. Like I mentioned, I just haven't had the hiccups in 6 years, and this is like something you never think about that. It's like, who thinks about hiccups? But I'm like, I haven't had hiccups in 6 years. Wonder why that
ridiculous.
Is. Yeah.
Do you drink carbonated anything?
Every once in a while I'll have like a sparkling water, but generally not much. I know when we were in Mexico, we would tend to drink the stuff that came. I didn't want to drink the tap water, so it's kind of like, it's one of those things. It's kind of, you're not so sure about how safe the water is.
Absolutely. That is not an urban myth.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of people get the old Montezuma's revenge from visiting Mexico. And so, but I, no problems. I went there and had no issues at all with that. Do you, how's your sleep? Sleep good? Okay.
Sleep is less. I'm a real early riser, so I'm up between like 3:30 and 4, and I do a bit of practicing before I go off and make my, my day job. And I would say I'm sleeping less and having more trouble staying asleep, but the quality of my sleep is good. My snoring has stopped completely. Yeah. And my wife was, pretty certain I had apnea. She'd hear me stop sleeping in the middle of the night. I couldn't sleep on my bed upstairs. I had to sleep on the recliner down here. And now I sleep with her. There's no snoring. We actually, both of us lay in the bed and we can go, 2 hours without touching each other.
Yeah. And no doubt you probably had sleep apnea, particularly if they hear you stopping, and it's pretty common. It's good to see it because when you're in interrupted sleep, it just, everything goes south from that. You're more insulin resistant, you're tired. You tend to eat garbage when you do that. So again, you get this positive feedback loop type of thing. Yeah. Do you have any, you said you're pretty much where you want to be as far as weight wise, or do you have any more goals that you're trying to attain?
I'm not trying to lose weight, but I'm not afraid if I do, I'm going to kind of stick to carnivore. Like I said, I've been sort of messing around a little bit just to see what I can get away with. But once I'm through with my little experimentation, then I'll go back to all meat and sort of see where I settle. But I'm a pretty broad-shouldered guy, so I don't see myself settling much below 180. I just, like I said, with a 32-inch waist, and my high school graduation waist was 36.
Right.
I'm smaller than I've ever been.
Yeah, you're like a freshman in high school again, or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. When I played soccer was the last time I had a 32-inch waist, and that was 10th grade before I started smoking weed.
Well, that's good for you. Well, I'm not that smoking weed part, but I mean the good for you losing weight. It's kind of interesting when you look at the diagnosis for metabolic syndrome for males. I think the cutoff is 40 inches, and so just 32 is pretty good. Now, I've got a 36-inch waist, but I'm 6'5", and so it's a different metric there when you're taller. So
proportionately, 5'6" and 32 is the same as 6'5" and 36. That's my story. I'm sticking to it.
It's probably not far from that. It's probably similar. Well, are you on social media at all? Do you do much of that stuff?
I have a small music channel, 26 subscribers, I think it is. It's actually I have one under Ron Baker Jr., but I also have a stage name that's RJ Redenbaker. If you remember Orville Redenbacher, the popcorn guy.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
My middle name is Orville, so I used to get called Orville Redenbaker when I was a kid.
I got it. Yeah, Orville's it's not a common name. It's kind of an older name. It's
RJ Redenbaker.
I don't think anybody names their kid Orville these days. Probably not.
Not anybody that loves them.
All right. Well, I will tell you what, Ron, it's been a pleasure getting to chat with you. It's always nice to see somebody with the same last name as me.
Likewise.
There's more of us out there. Keep up the good work. Appreciate what you're doing. I'm sure this is going to inspire somebody to take up the challenge, because there's a lot of people that were in your shoes for sure. There's lots and lots. There's an endless supply of guys that are in bad shape, and we got to change it. So thank you for being part of this.
Hey, I'm just glad to get the opportunity to share it. Appreciate your time very much.
Yeah, fun talking to you. Okay, guys, we'll be back tomorrow. We got another success story tomorrow. So thanks so much. We'll see everybody later. Bye, guys. Take care.
Take care.
Hey folks, it's Dr. ShawnBaker here. If you guys are enjoying these success stories, well, you can become your own success story. You can do that by heading over to CarnivoreDiet. You can sign up for a free 30-day trial and get started today. We're looking forward to supporting you. Our community is wonderful, and we'd love to see your success.